It was the Cold War. Paranoia was currency, and information could make or break governments. In the middle of all that, a brutal KGB interrogator with a reputation so dark, even Soviet agents whispered his name with hesitation, Mikhail Petrov. When word leaked that Petrov was planning to defect in Belgrade, 3 of the world's most powerful intelligence services snapped into motion. The CIA wanted to protect.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
Protect him. The KGB wanted to kill him. But Mossad, they wanted something else entirely. Not just the intel. Not just the man. They wanted to take him before anyone else could. And that's exactly what they did. Petrov wasn't just any defector. He was the guy who had personally interrogated captured Israeli agents. He knew their names, their operations, their methods. And worse, he knew what they had given up under pressure. Mossad had no interest in seeing that walk into the arms of the CIA, even if they were supposed to be allies. So, while the CIA prepped for a careful extraction and the Soviets scrambled to figure out how to silence him, Israel made a different call. They sent in the Mossad, armed with precision, patience, and a plan that would shake the walls of more than one embassy. The whole thing went down in Belgrade, Yugoslavia, neutral ground during the Cold War, but crawling with spies from every corner of the globe. That's where Petrov was hiding, waiting for his chance to flip. The CIA had eyes on him. The KGB had a target on his back. Mossad had other ideas. And here's where it gets wild. Despite all the surveillance, all the moving parts, and all the competing interests, Mossad pulled off a kidnapping so clean, it made the CIA look like amateurs. It started with reconnaissance. Kalemgdan Park, the sprawling public space where Petrov often walked, became the staging ground. Mossad didn't just stumble into this. They studied Petrov's habits. They watched him from park benches, restaurants, side streets. They knew his timings, his fears, and most importantly, they knew the CIA's schedule. What followed was a masterclass in covert coordination. Mossad teams infiltrated the area, synced through covert communication systems. They knew they had a small window: grab Petrov before the CIA made contact. Every move was timed. Every route calculated. Then, in one swift strike, it happened. Petrov was intercepted. Not by the Americans he was expecting, but by Mossad agents posing as a trusted contact. Before the CIA even realized what went down, Petrov was already en route out of Yugoslavia. Disoriented, likely terrified, and now property of a country he never planned to work with. Once in Israeli hands, the real extraction began. Not a physical one, an informational one. Petrov was debriefed on everything. The interrogation techniques he used. The Soviet methods he mastered. What Israeli agents had confessed under torture. What operations had been exposed. Who inside Israel might be already been compromised. This wasn't just a security update, it was a full-scale damage report on Israeli intelligence vulnerabilities. And it was invaluable. Petrov may have thought defection was his ticket to freedom, but Mossad saw it differently. He wasn't escaping. He was answering for what he had done. To say this caused tension with the CIA would be putting it mildly. The Americans were furious. They had invested time, resources, and trust in managing Petrov's defection. Israel, their supposed ally, had swooped in and taken the prize. No warning. No coordination. Just cold, calculated theft of a human asset. But from Israel's point of view, this wasn't theft. It was damage control. They weren't just protecting secrets. They were protecting lives, strategies, and their own ability to operate in the shadows. Petrov's knowledge could have put dozens of Israeli operations at risk. He wasn't a source. He was a threat. And when it came down to diplomacy versus security, Mossad chose security every single time. The operation cemented Mossad's global reputation for being ruthlessly efficient. They kidnapped a high-value defector from right under the CIA's nose and vanished without a trace. In the world of espionage, that's not just impressive. That's legendary. Of course, it wasn't without consequences. Diplomatic fallout with the United States followed. Trust between the intelligence services fractured. The ethical questions this operation raised still debated to this day. Where do you draw the line between ally and adversary when secrets are on the table? Is it betrayal if it protects your country? These are the uncomfortable realities of intelligence work. And the Mossad's Belgrade operation threw them into the spotlight. It also highlighted something bigger. Even among allies, the intelligence world is a battlefield. Just because countries wear the same jersey doesn't mean they're not trying to steal the playbook. This wasn't the first time intelligence services undercut each other. But it was a textbook example of how far Mossad was willing to go to protect national interests. Diplomatic cost be damned. And in terms of intel payoff, it was massive. Petrov didn't just talk, he revealed how Soviet interrogators broke prisoners, how long it took agents to crack, what psychological methods worked best, and which Israeli operations had been permanently compromised. Israel walked away with a clearer understanding of what the KGB knew, how they operated, and how to shield future agents from similar breakdowns. That kind of knowledge doesn't just close security gaps, it reshapes intelligence doctrine. It trains future agents. It rewrites how interrogations are resisted and how operations are structured. So while the operation might have sparked international outrage behind closed doors, it gave Israel an edge it never would have had otherwise. There's also the darker irony. Petrov defected to escape the system he helped enforce, but in trying to run from it, he walked straight into the hands of those he once tortured. Cold War espionage wasn't about good guys and bad guys, it was about who got to the target first. And in this case, Mossad didn't just win. They dominated. The Belgrade operation became a turning point not just for Israeli intelligence, but for how allied agencies viewed each other. Trust eroded. Protocols changed. And behind the scenes, new rules were written for how much cooperation was actually safe between countries, even friendly ones. In the end, Mossad's move wasn't just about revenge or strategy. It was a message. Loud and clear. We protect our own. And if you're holding information that threatens us, we will come for you no matter who you think is watching your back. Petrov thought he was stepping into freedom. Instead, he walked into the most high-stakes intelligence extraction of the decade. It's a reminder that in the shadows of international espionage, the real war isn't always between enemies. Sometimes, it's between allies. If you're into real-life spy stories that make even Hollywood scripts look tame, don't forget to like, share, and hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment if you think Mossad went too far or if you think the CIA got exactly what it deserved. We'll see you in the next unraveling. And just like that, the game had changed. The CIA was left reeling. 1 minute, they were preparing for a high-level defection, coordinating with contacts, running background checks, planning safe houses. The next, their asset was gone. Not silenced by the KGB. Not scared off. But scooped up by their own ally, in what might be been one of the boldest behind-your-back operations ever pulled in Cold War history. There were meetings. Angry phone calls. Fingers pointed. Official channels were used, but everyone knew there wouldn't be an apology coming from Tel Aviv. Why would there be from Mossad's perspective? They'd done the job no one else had the stomach to do. This wasn't just a rogue move, it was a surgical strike. A preemptive move to protect their people, their operations, and their future. And they'd done it in the heart of a neutral capital, under the noses of not one, but two of the most powerful intelligence agencies in the world. Let that sink in for a second. In Belgrade, the CIA had stationed eyes on Petrov. They'd built rapport. The plan was clean: extract him, debrief him, and keep him in US custody under the pretense of protection. But Mossad understood something the Americans didn't. Petrov wasn't just a defector, he was a liability with a ledger of names and confessions. And some of those names were Israeli. Some of those confessions had cost agents their lives. So Mossad didn't wait for diplomatic clearance. They moved. And when they moved, they didn't just capture a man, they hijacked an entire operation. Now, what came out of that debriefing back in Israel, that's where the real weight of the story lands, because Petrov knew everything. His knowledge wasn't theoretical or second-hand. He'd been there. In the rooms. With the lights. With the questions. He was the one making agents break. For Mossad, it was like opening a vault of secrets, except the contents were their own. Their agents. Their compromises. Their past mistakes, laid bare by the very man who had orchestrated them. Petrov detailed the psychological profiles the KGB built on each Israeli prisoner. He explained how they broke agents not through violence, but through routine sleep deprivation, humiliation, manufactured hope. He outlined which Israeli operations were exposed, how quickly agents had cracked, and, most damningly, what that meant for the integrity of ongoing missions. This wasn't a gold mine. It was a minefield. The debriefing became a crash course in how not to get caught. Mossad analysts picked apart Petrov's tactics and reverse-engineered strategies to resist them. Entire training programs were rewritten. Operational security protocols got a full overhaul. Because now they knew exactly what they were up against. And Petrov, he wasn't treated as some hero of espionage. He was a tool. An asset to be drained, assessed, and eventually shelved. Whatever promises the CIA had made to him, freedom, comfort, a new life, they never reached him. Mossad never cared about his afterlife. They cared about his data. Meanwhile, over in Langley, the mood was tense. The US intelligence community doesn't like being outplayed, especially not by its own allies. But there wasn't much they could do. Israel never denied it. They didn't issue press releases or spin the story in the media, but behind closed doors, they made one thing clear: Petrov had interrogated Israelis. He knew things he shouldn't. And letting that walk into American hands, even friendly hands, was not an option. The incident triggered a quiet rift between the CIA and Mossad. Cooperation continued because it had to, but trust was fractured. New barriers were put up. Shared intel came slower. Joint ops became more guarded. It was the kind of damage that doesn't show up in headlines, but lingers in briefing rooms and encrypted channels for years. And if you're wondering what happened to Petrov, well, that part's murky. After his debriefing, he vanished from public record. No trial. No press leaks. Just, gone. He wasn't a war criminal, technically. There were no charges. No court. Just a former torturer sitting in a foreign land, held by the very country whose agents he once tried to destroy. Some say Mossad used him as a consultant for a time, an unwilling professor in psychological warfare. Others think he was quietly relocated, kept under observation until he outlived his usefulness. And then who knows? But here's the bigger takeaway: this wasn't just a story about one kidnapping. It was a warning. In the espionage world, alliances are temporary. Cooperation is conditional. And trust that's a liability. Even during the Cold War, when East and West were locked in a global standoff, even when the stakes were nuclear, intelligence agencies still watched their backs against their allies. Because everyone's got secrets. And when one of those secrets decides to defect, it's not about who deserves them. It's about who gets there first. The Mossad operation in Belgrade became a textbook case in intelligence circles. Not just for its tactical precision, but for its audacity. It asked a question that made a lot of people uncomfortable: if your ally's defector threatens your national security, do you let them walk? Israel answered that question. Not with words, but with action. They didn't send a diplomat. They sent a team. They didn't wait for permission. They created an opportunity. And they didn't apologize for the fallout, because to them, the mission was the justification. And that's the uncomfortable part, right? Because technically, yes, Mossad undermined the CIA. They violated the norms of cooperation. But strategically they secured one of the most valuable intelligence windfalls in Israeli history. So was it worth it? Depends who you ask. Ask the Americans, and you'll get a story about betrayal. Ask the Israelis, and you'll hear a story about survival. Ask the Soviets. Well, they just lost a top-tier interrogator and watched two enemies fight over his corpse like vultures at a feast. And for everyone else watching from the sidelines, it became a case study in the brutal logic of espionage: if you want to stay safe, you stay sharp. Because even your friends have knives. The Petrov operation was a reminder that in the spy world, ethics don't win wars. Access does. It didn't matter what side of the Iron Curtain you stood on. If you had information-sensitive, dangerous, game-changing information, you became a target. Not just for the enemy, but for everyone. There were no rules. There were only results. So the next time you hear someone talk about intelligence alliances and shared values, remember Petrov. Remember the park in Belgrade. Remember the silence that followed when one agency beat the others to the punch. And remember, this is how the game is played. And here's the thing: the story didn't end when Petrov disappeared. It echoed. It changed the way intelligence agencies dealt with defectors. It reshaped how allies trusted each other, or more accurately, didn't it? Because after Belgrade, every agency knew that even within the so-called friendly circle, there were no guarantees. No shared moral high ground. The whole idea of "we're on the same side" got replaced with "we'll be on the same side, until your asset becomes our threat." That was the legacy Mossad left behind. Not just the success of the operation, but the precedent it set. Think about it: Petrov could ve handed over names of Israeli double agents. He could ve exposed cover identities. He could ve detailed how much information was extracted during those brutal KGB interrogations, and if any of that landed in American hands, it could ve ended careers, compromised missions, or even put lives at risk. That's not paranoia. That's protocol. So Mossad didn't gamble. They calculated. They weighed the diplomatic blowback, the CIA's fury, the risk of international scandal, and still decided it was worth it. Because when it came down to operational security versus international cooperation, security won. Every time. What's wild is how flawlessly it all went down. A live operation in a public space, crawling with rival intelligence teams, in a neutral country during peak Cold War paranoia, and Mossad pulled it off without a shot fired. No casualties. No public incident. No trace. It wasn't luck. It was surgical. And more importantly, it was intentional. They weren't just removing a defector. They were sending a message: if you hold a threat to Israeli intelligence, no matter where you are or who you're talking to, we will get to you first. It rattled people. Quietly, but deeply. Other agencies took note. Debriefings across NATO started to shift. Defector protocol got more paranoid. CIA handlers became more suspicious of foreign operatives, especially when high-value assets were involved. Because now they'd seen what Mossad was willing to do and how well they could do it. And let's not forget the KGB in all this. They lost a valuable man, one of their top interrogators. Someone who knew too much. But they weren't the ones who neutralized the problem. The enemy they feared, the Americans, didn't get him. Their own counterintelligence couldn't stop him. But the Israelis, they made him vanish. That loss hurt. And it exposed a painful truth for the Soviets: even at the peak of their surveillance game, even with assets spread across Yugoslavia, they couldn't prevent a surgical snatch right under their nose. If the KGB had any illusions about the limits of Mossad's reach, those were gone now. And behind all the shadowy moves, let's not forget the human cost. Petrov, for all his cruelty, was a man on the run. A man trying to escape the consequences of his past by running to another power. But instead of being rewarded or sheltered, he was outplayed. Not by enemies but by the people he had once harmed. He wasn't captured in the heat of war. He wasn't dragged from a battlefield. He was taken in broad daylight while thinking he was stepping into freedom. That's the poetic part. Mossad didn't just reclaim a threat, they delivered a reckoning. The man who broke others in interrogation rooms was now the one being deconstructed. His secrets were laid bare. His methods were dissected. His power, the thing that once made him feared, was reduced to data points and analysis memos. There's something brutally full circle about that. And while the public never saw headlines, and no court ever passed judgment, the sentence had been handed down the moment Mossad intercepted him: you do not get to disappear quietly after breaking our people, you get to answer for it even if no one ever hears about it. If you're still watching, you know this wasn't just a spy story. This was power in motion. A reminder that in the end, it's not about who writes the rules, it's about who has the nerve to break them when it counts. So don't forget to like this video if you're as blown away by Mossad's move as we are. Leave a comment and tell us, do you think the CIA should have seen it coming, or was this a checkmate no one could stop? And of course, subscribe for more deep dives into the biggest moments in spy history, scandal, and strategy. Because we're just getting started.